Welcome everyone to another Get Legit webinar. This is Cannabis Farming Basics for the Home Grower, Part 3, Drying, Curing, and Storing Your Harvest. Today is Thursday, March 5th, 2026, and my name is Erin. I am the Education and Communications Manager here at the Cannabis Alliance. I'd like to thank you all for joining us this afternoon. It is our hope that anyone interested in commercial cannabis here in Nevada County will take the time to tune into these webinars, educate themselves, and continue to be or become stewards of the environment and of our community. The Get Legit educational series provides the preparation necessary to assist in securing a local cultivation permit and state cultivation license. The series includes webinars, support groups, business skills trainings, and a mentor program. All the webinars are online, free of charge, and open to the public. So, what is the Alliance? We are a nonprofit trade association representing the local cannabis industry here in Nevada County. Our mission is to support public policy initiatives through representative advocacy and provide educational opportunities for business growth and success. There are many ways to get involved. One of them is to become a member. The Nevada County Cannabis Alliance plays a vital role in shaping policies that strengthen the economic sustainability and success of our locally licensed cannabis industry. If you are a licensed cannabis business here in Nevada County that has benefited from cannabis policies that we've worked on, we would love for you to join our membership to ensure that we can continue serving our local cannabis community. We appreciate your support so much. Some services that we provide to our members are on the slide. It's a consistent voice and representation locally and at the statewide level. Year-round continuing education that includes compliance and regulatory workshops, business skills trainings, cannabis farming best practices, seminars, and more. We help you navigate the permit and ongoing compliance processes with the resources and support you need. We have a buddy program to pair permitted farmers with new farmers who want to learn more from experienced growers, and seasonal industry mixers and events for community and connection. Another way you can get involved is to become a sponsor. We want to thank our current sponsors, Ag Natural, Cramner Engineering, Plan Air Landscape Architecture, Humboldt Seed Company, Mr. B's Green Trees, Gold Coast Botanicals, and Elevation 2477 or 2477. Thank you all so much for your support, and we're happy to have you on board. If you are a local business looking to support the cannabis industry here in Nevada County, we'd love for you to join us. And we're so grateful for our current sponsors who believe in the work that we do, and we could not do this work without you. So if you are interested in doing so and becoming a sponsor, you can email us at info@cannabisalliance.org, or you can visit our website at nccannabisalliance.org/sponsorship to find out more. I'll put all these links in the chat as well, by the way. You can follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/Nevada County Alliance or on Instagram at Nevada County Alliance. We have a bi-monthly newsletter you can subscribe to, which is on our website, and the link is right there at nccannabisalliance.org/subscribe. And of course, any additional questions, you can email info@cannabisalliance.org. Some upcoming webinars that we have: Amending Native Soil, which is on Thursday, March 26th, from 3 to 4. Daniel Fink actually will be presenting on this webinar as well. So stay tuned for that. This webinar will guide cannabis growers in Nevada County through the fundamentals of amending native soil for optimal plant health and yield. And I'll put that link to register in the chat. You can find all of our Get Legit webinars and the links to register at nccannabisalliance.org/getlegit. And that's pretty much it. The format of today's webinar is that Daniel will give you a presentation with Q&A to follow. If you have any questions, your participation is encouraged in the chat section, and Q&A are there for you to use. And feel free to ask any questions that you may have, as that will make the webinar more useful for everyone. And that is my little short presentation. I'll go ahead and pass it over to Daniel Fink to introduce himself and continue with his presentation he started earlier. Thanks for being here, Daniel. I appreciate it.
Great. Thank you so much, everybody. It's great to be here. Let me start screen sharing again. Does that look okay? See the first slide there?
That looks great. Perfect.
Great. So again, my name is Daniel Fink, Down Home Farms here in Nevada County. We're a multiply certified organic farm. Our brand mostly on the shelves is, as you see it in this picture, called Farm Cut. You can see it's a nice glass jar, and we're going to talk a little bit today about why we do that. The previous presentations I did were about soil management, fertility management, really more living plant focused. Today is going to be a little bit shorter and more succinct, but just as important to your final product. Uh, it is post harvest and post harvest procedure. We're calling it harvest to jar. Why do these processes matter? Is because this is where we really determine the final quality of our product. You can grow a phenomenal plant, a healthy plant. You can grow big, beautiful buds that smell great, and then you can ruin the taste and flavor and aroma in the process of drying and curing it if done improperly. Uh, Same goes with improper handling. Handling would include the way you're actually physically handling it and also the temperature and humidity. Our goal is to preserve all of the aroma potency and end up with a nice smooth smoke so you can enjoy your hard earned crops. Um, we recommend to time your harvest properly. This is, the plant is standing. It's late September or maybe October, and the plant is nearing maturity. We often get the question about when is the right time to harvest. There's a lot of debate around this. The best way to know is to get yourself a loupe or a microscope to look at your crystals up close to check the trichomes and see what color they are. As it states in this slide, if the trichomes are all clear, it is immature. If they are all cloudy, then it is essentially peaked on its THC production. And then when they start to turn amber, that signals full ripeness, as stated here, mostly cloudy with 5 to 20% amber trichomes. That's in the bud, not on the outer leaves. Is going to be ideal timing for your harvest to get peak ripeness. And with that peak ripeness comes the full potential of flavors and aromas that you could get from that plant. Here are some photos of trichome maturity. On the left, you can see a fully clear trichome. The bulb on the top of it is clear and you can see right through it. And then the center photos show more cloudy and amber trichomes, which means they are approaching maturity. And then the picture on the right is actually showing full maturity. That's fully ambered. The stalks will become cloudy white and the heads will be brown amber colored. It's very important to harvest during the cooler morning hours. Some people also choose to harvest after sunset, which is always an option if early morning is not possible for you. Um, that being said, terpene production is at the peak at sunrise. So if you can harvest 1 hour before sunrise, you will lock in the most potential flavor into your flower. Obviously, we want to handle them very gently to preserve the trichomes, keep them from breaking and falling off. Removing large fan leaves in the field is advisable. And then hanging large branches or whole plants is my preferred method, even though it isn't necessarily as efficient with drying space. I think it is gentler on the branches and also helps to regulate humidity in your drying space a little bit better. We'll get more to that in a moment. So we've now cut our plants from the field. We've walked them to our drying space, and we want that space to be conditioned. Most people suggest 60 degrees and 60% relative humidity. That is pretty easily achieved with a window unit air conditioner or something like that. Air conditioners not only cool the air, but they also remove humidity from the air. Sometimes, if you have a lot of material in a very small space, you may need to use an air conditioner and a dehumidifier. You want to keep the drying room very dark as possible. Gentle indirect airflow, so some circulation fans in the space are helpful, but not directly beating on the cut branches. And ideal drying time is between 10 and 14 days. We are here in the Sierra foothills where it's extremely dry, almost year round in the air. Uh, and our ambient moisture is sometimes 30% or even 35%, very, very, very low. And so if you put a small amount of branches into a very large space, they're going to dry out very, very quickly, maybe only 5 or 7 days. Why we want to extend the drying time is because that will preserve more of the terpenes, preserve more of the flavonoids, and ultimately give you a smoother smoke. Um, if you put lots of branches into a small space, the relative humidity will initially climb very, very high. It might be up towards 70 or 75% with all that wet material in the room. And so sometimes people will add an extra dehumidifier for the first day or two at the most. But then after that, you will see the relative humidity drop off very significantly because the cut plant is no longer giving off moisture. And at that point, some people actually have to add humidity to the space to prolong the drying time. Again, if you dry it quickly in 5 to 7 days, you lose a lot of your potential terpenes, and it can create a harsher smoke, not giving the chlorophyll enough time to break down. Here's some visual cues. This is obviously a very fancy, very large drying room, but you can see those are large branches, almost whole plants, cut and hung on a simple dowel. And you can see it's nice and clean in there. That room is obviously air conditioned. This is another way that it can be done. You can see these are baker's racks, two different types of baker's racks, which are very common, available many places, and are easy to clean. And in this picture, you can see the branches are cut much smaller, but they're still in there very densely. And keeping your material densely packed into the room helps to regulate humidity. Again, it prevents the humidity from dropping off too quickly after the first day or two. Obviously, these are very fancy professional drying rooms. The same can be achieved in a closet with a little ingenuity. After the plant has hung for 7 to 10 days, we then go into the curing stage, the curing process. I recommend you place your dried flowers into glass jars. Turkey bags, Ziploc bags are terrible for long-term storage. They should really only be used for no more than like a daily transport. Um, Fill your glass containers about 70% full. That's to allow some oxygen in the container and regulate the moisture out of the product. Some people do choose to put humidity sensors inside their jars. You'd want it about 58 to 62. And opening the jars daily is very, very important for the first week or two to release moisture. We call that burping. And some people do this process in bins, 27-gallon black and yellow plastic bins if they have a lot of product, or jars if they can manage. And burping the moist air out of those containers, it is also removing the CO2 that is being expelled by the plant matter. So you have to open the container to let that out. Otherwise, you can end up with a very stale product. It starts to smell like mildew, and that is not what anybody wants. It's somewhat tricky at almost any stage. You can take a perfect product and turn it into almost garbage. But if you follow these guidelines, you are much more likely to have success. Storage for those jars. After the first 2 weeks of burping, if it's for long-term storage, I recommend you vac seal the jar like I do for my brand Farm Cut. not necessary for short-term storage. You want to keep those jars in 55 to 65-degree temperatures. You want to keep the ambient at about 55% humidity. You want them to be in dark because the UV light in the sun will degrade the flowers, make them turn brown, and limiting oxygen exposure. Remember to close your jar. Try not to open your jar too much. That will help preserve the terpenes and the flavor and smell. Some key takeaways from today's little lesson. You always want to harvest at peak trichome maturity. You can make sure you're doing that by buying yourself a $10 jeweler's loop to look up close at your crystals. Dry slowly in controlled conditions, slow and cool. Be patient with the curing, minimum 2 weeks, in my opinion, ideally a month to 6 weeks to develop the aroma and smoothness of the flower. And store properly in low temperatures and moderate humidity and no light to maintain quality. I hope that you all got something out of this today. It's a pleasure to share my experience and knowledge with everybody. And I'm hoping that maybe you guys have some questions. I know today's was a bit shorter than the other lessons, but I think we covered all the bases.
Cool. Thank you so much, Daniel. I have a couple of questions to start. So you said the burping curing process is about a month before you store them. Is this to clarify?
2 weeks minimum.
Oh, 2 weeks minimum.
Yep, 2 weeks of burping.
Okay.
That's opening the jar or bin every day. And then after that, you can put them away into the storage phase, or you can continue burping for up to a month. After the first 2 weeks, the daily becomes less necessary. You can burp them every few days.
Mm-hmm.
But if your ambient, your room humidity and temperature were well regulated while you were burping, 2 weeks is usually sufficient.
Okay. And how do you keep the humidity inside the jars at that level? I think it was like 55 something percent. How do you
Well, it's
do that?
it's that's actually that's just the moisture being expelled by the plant matter itself. After you've taken it out of the drying room at approximately 60-60, if you go and you trim that material or you break it down and put it into jars and bins, it will mm, by default be at about 55 to 60% humidity inside those jars.
Okay. And so by burping it every day, you're keeping it at that humidity level.
We're letting out a very small amount of humidity, which we want to do, and we're also letting out the CO2.
Okay. And it's just a quick like open it up, close it, or is it like
Open, waft some fresh air in there, close it back up.
okay. Cool. And then is there another way that you can tell that so the drying time is 10 to 14 days ideally. But let's say you go in there and you just your fans are blowing too much or you're something goes wrong with the humidity levels. How can you tell that a plant is ready by touching it or just by looking at it? Is
Oh
there
yeah, that's a very good question. So as they're hanging, after day 5 or 6, you want to start going into your dry room and what we call snapping stems. And so you start with the smallest, the most narrow stems, and you simply bend them and see if they crack, snap when you bend them. At first, the smallest stems will be the first to crack, and then eventually you want your biggest stems, your main stems, to be snapping. And as soon as those main stems start snapping, uh, that means it's pretty much time to get it into out of the drying room and into a closed container. Um, the outer edges of the buds are the first part to give up their moisture, and then the core of the thickest stems is the last part to give up its moisture. And so once that moisture is out of the thick stems, that means it's time to move on to the next phase.
okay? Could you do it in like in steps? Like if your big stems are still kind of bendy, but your smaller stems are starting to snap, could you take those out and start the process, or do you want to really just do everything at the same time?
You really want to keep everything at the same time. And you want to go by the largest stems because then those large stems are going to go into a bin with the smaller stems and they all regulate each other. So if these are lower in moisture and these are higher in moisture, you actually want to get them to equilibrium. And so then homogenizing that material into a bin um, then gives you homogenized humidity levels in your whole batch.
Okay. And is there a benefit to cutting the branches so large as opposed to just cutting like a 8 inch or 10 inch branch?
Yes, again, moisture regulation. The
Moisture.
larger amount of wood material, the larger amount of branch that goes into your drying room and your curing bin is both going to help to regulate the moisture, keep it from drying out too fast. Plus, for really long-term storage, this is a good point to make. Let's say you just want to process half your stash and save the other half for like March. Um, you would want to leave the the stored portion on the largest branches possible. You basically want to leave them nice, long, big pieces, put them in the bin like that with all the leaf on them and everything. That's going to help preserve them for a longer period of time.
Okay. So for the ones that you're ready to um after the drying process and you're ready to continue processing them, is there another step? I'm familiar with something like bucking to kind of take them off. Is that how when do you kind of start that process?
Yeah, so I mentioned bucking when going into the jar. If you're going into a jar, you can buck it right. Bucking is removing the buds from the branch. Bud shucking is where the word comes from. And so if you're going into small jars, you can buck the buds right off the branches into the jar. Um, if you're going into bins, I find that leaving it on branches works better. It keeps the buds from crushing each other. It helps to regulate the moisture in the bin. Typically, in a bin, you have some empty space at the top as well. So having that woody material again keeps the moisture from escaping too quickly.
Okay. So you want to
Uh,
wait until you're really putting things into jars to start your bucking process when it's ready.
I do,
You do. Okay.
yeah.
That makes sense.
More commercial processes are the other way around. But if we're trying to preserve uh, every aspect of the bud's integrity, then we want to keep it as intact as possible for as long as possible.
Okay, that's good to know. And then I guess from the drying process to the curing process to the bucking process, how long would you wait until you're ready to start trimming everything up?
Um, some people start trimming at the end of the 2 week curing immediately.
Hmm.
Some people would give it another 2 weeks. I think anywhere in that range, you're pretty much good. And again, if you're going to wait longer than that, just leave it on big branches in bins with all its leaves. If you're going to wait a couple months to trim it, that's perfectly acceptable, and it'll preserve the best if you keep it big and whole.
Okay. Let's say you do want to hold on to it for a couple of months, and you said that the curing process is about 2 weeks, can be extended to a month, but if you're keeping it in long-term storage, how often would you want to check on those plants, and what would that kind of drying process look like? Or do you want the drying process to stop, and how do you stop it?
So okay, so long-term storage, definitely refer to the temperature and humidity noted about storage. If your room is not between 55 and 65 degrees, you're going to have trouble with long-term storage. If it's average of 75 or 72 degrees in the storage room, or it's heating up in the middle of the day in the sunshine or something like that, your stuff is not going to bode well for long-term storage. After the 2 to 4 weeks of burping, of curing, if you've done that part right and your room is nice and cool and regulated, you can leave that bin closed for a month at a time, at least, or more. Um, Sometimes I'm shocked actually at how well it's preserved. But those first 2 to 4 weeks, getting all of the CO2 out of that bin, and all of the excess moisture, and then having the ambient space around the bin regulated, nice and cool, is the key to long-term storage. I mean, if you check on it once every 6 weeks, even 8 weeks, it's pretty much fine.
Okay. And then let's say, I'm just giving lots of scenarios of experiences I've had. That let's say you have a long-term storage, you're not ready to trim or whatever the case is, the buds have been sitting in bins and now they've over dried somehow. Um, are there
Ooh.
techniques for rehumidifying things? Like I've heard
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
tortillas and humidity packets, but what's your favorite?
Yeah, I mean, tortillas were the old school way to do it, but it leaves a yeasty aroma sometimes, and they're kind of weird. And I don't recommend tortillas. The best thing is to go, um, if you don't, okay, let's just say you happen to have some more pot plants growing somewhere, is you go cut a whole branch off of your pot plant and you throw the fresh branch into the bin.
Mm.
That is the best thing you can do.
That's really, I've never heard
If
of
you
that. That's a good idea.
it really works. Even a bunch of handfuls of fresh leaves. If you have a friend that has some good, clean plants, you can just go grab a bunch of fresh leaves. If you don't have pot plants, you can go and harvest other things from your garden. Just make sure they're clean, that they don't have mold or mildew on them, that they're not covered in bugs. But literally any growing leafy green, you can take it and throw it in there. Unless it's extremely aromatic, it's not going to mess with your flavor. And if none of that is available, I recommend filtered water on a paper towel, and then you put that paper towel draped over the side of the bin, so that it doesn't touch any flour, but that it's giving its moisture into the bin. Does that sort of make sense?
Yeah, it does. I've also heard of a technique where you can just sort of duct tape a piece of paper, like a paper towel, and to the top of the lid. And then if it's just really dry, you just spray it and try to get it back to that level. Is that another good technique? As long as it's not
Yeah.
touching the flour.
Yeah, basically same thing. That's kind of like an improvised moisture pack. They do sell products. There's 2 or 3 companies out there that sell moisture regulators. They're basically silica gels in a wrapper, and they're okay. I don't like to rely on them, but I think in a pinch, they can work on the jar scale. On
Yeah,
the
they're kind of
bin
expensive.
scale, yeah, they're expensive, and yeah, but on the bin size, paper towel. Yeah.
Okay. Cool. I have some more questions, but I wanted to give Gina and Glenn the opportunity to ask some questions. If you have any, this is a great moment to do so. You can get your questions answered right here. You can either raise your hand or put the question that you have in the chat box, or you can put it in the Q&A. Um, all of those are open and available right now for questions. If you have them, please ask them. This is a great opportunity to do so. Um, and in the meantime, I have some more questions. So in the very beginning, let's go back to before you're drying and curing. Do you have any techniques for actually like it's time for harvest and your plants are still on the ground and you need to think ahead about how you want those plants to hang. Are there techniques to cutting the branches down so that your hanging is easier and they can hang on those big branches? Techniques would be great.
Yeah. Yeah, you bring up a good point. It's hard to describe, so I'll do my best. Um, the cannabis plant always forks. The branches fork off. And so um, if you have one main cola at the top. After you take that main cola off, you're going to have a bunch of forked branches going down the plant. You're able to cut those forks and use them like a hanger. If you have one branch short off the main branch and the other one and the long branch coming off the other side, you're then able to make an easy hanger out of the stalk itself. I have also found, um, I mean, a long time ago, this was this was sort of unacceptable to me. Um, but the lower, small, really smaller buds on the branch also work just fine as a hanger if you're gentle with it. And so you can, if you have branches that you couldn't make a, a Y-shaped hanger out of the main stalk, then you can just hang them onto the lowest small bud. It won't really damage it. Usually those smallest buds don't trim out to be much of anything anyway. And as far as hanging materials, uh, there are people use Hortonova netting, plastic trellis netting. People use cattle panels. People use metal fencing, plastic fencing of all kinds. Some people even just use single strand wire. And all of those are good options. It's really what fits into your space that makes sense. Um, another thought, pre harvest, I sort of mentioned it in the slideshow. If you have a lot of material to get through, if you have a lot of plants and a small space to dry them in, it is recommended to remove all the large fan leaves. Just the ones that stick out really far, just the really big ones. But that way you're able to fit them in a little bit more tightly, and you're not bringing such a huge amount of humidity into your drying room. I do see a question here in the chat. What do I think about bud washing? I think bud washing can be helpful in certain scenarios. I prefer to design my garden in such a way that it doesn't get dusty, that I'm not driving past it and kicking up dust, that the ground is either mulched or has grass growing or something in it to keep it from being bare soil. I am also very, very meticulous about my fungal prevention. And so, what a lot of bud washing is for when somewhat innocuous things like powdery mildew come in and cover your plant, and it's very visually unappealing. And people want to wash that off, make it not visible anymore, and so they'll wash their buds. There are definitely some bugs that can be washed out effectively, but it's a really, really labor intensive process. And I do actually think that it affects the terpenes. I also think it affects the color. I think it darkens the bud a few shades, which is not necessarily desirable. Um, but it can definitely help you if you're having a lot of problems. So,
To add to that, let's say you do have powdery mildew, and that is something you don't want on your buds. Um, and I've had issues with that in the past, and we use like an agricultural hydrogen peroxide solution, but it was a lot of dipping, and there's a time limit. But could you talk a little bit about that? Just if people do run into that, what are the steps that people could take to avoid
yeah,
that?
yeah. If you are going to wash your buds, and again, it's not something I really recommend. Ounce of prevention is a pound of cure, right? So work on your fungal prevention angle, and so that way you'll never have to bud wash. And there are some products out there that are probably effective, but it's basically just hydrogen peroxide. 1 ounce per gallon, which is a very 1 ounce per gallon of uh, I believe it's 26% hydrogen peroxide. So it's a very strong, strong solution of hydrogen peroxide you're using if you actually want to kill the fungal spores. If you go lighter than that, you're not necessarily killing the fungal spores, and so then you end up smoking them. Um, you take your whole colas, your whole branches, um, and you fill up a whole bucket of this hydrogen peroxide solution. You dip the entire bud, submerge it in the solution. You shake it around, you agitate it, and then you take that out and you dip it and repeat that process in a vessel of clean water. And the clean water dip is super important after the hydrogen peroxide dip, because in that clean water, you will see a ton of uh, gross stuff be released from it. If you have a dusty garden or a buggy garden or a moldy garden, a lot of that will be released. And also, you'll actually just see a lot of trichomes and a lot of oils being released. So even if you did have clean flour going into that bud wash, you'd still see a lot of stuff float off of it, which can be a little confusing because it could also just be natural oils and trichomes. Um, and yeah, and so then you dip it in the fresh water, you let it drip dry outside, and once it's done dripping, you move it into your drying room, where you then have to try and bring it back to the 60/60.
Yeah, sounds like a process.
It's a huge process, and
Let's hope you just
uh,
don't have to deal with any of that. But I guess if you do, then maybe it's just limited to a few
yeah,
stems.
so like you can skip all of that by just spraying your plants with beneficial bacteria like 2 times in like late August, early September. Um, and you know, let's just put it this way: to spray six plants, to spray six big plants is 5 minutes. So 5 minutes twice is 10 minutes. Or you could spend, I don't know, 3 or 4 days washing six plants.
Right.
Um, I'll take 10 minutes over 3 days.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed. All right, cool. So then just to kind of take us through the whole from beginning to end, we've got the harvest and then the drying and the curing, the burping and all that, and then the storing. But we want to trim in between there at some point. What are, if you can, without a visual, give people an idea of like what trimming kind of looks like, what to have, what the bud should look like in the end, things to avoid.
Oh yeah, sure, sure. Yeah, so trimming happens between um, the curing and storage phase. Um, and I'm personally a terrible, terrible trimmer. I can describe it, but I can't do it. Uh, you have the branch, you buck off the buds from the branch, you hold each bud by the stem at the bottom of it. I recommend Shikamasa brand scissors. They are the best. They're from Japan. They're actually bonsai pruning scissors. And there are cheaper versions of that. That's just the nice one. And they have a curved blade. Okay, so the blade is curved like that, and so you're able to really reach into the bud with those curved blades. It's very important to use the point of the scissor and not the blade of the scissor. Hopefully, this is a good visual here. Um, Using the point of the blade keeps you from excessively damaging the buds. Um, and so you hold the bud by the stem at the bottom and you rotate it back and forth while trimming it with the scissor point. You really don't need to trim it all that close. As the buds get drier, the leaves also fall off, and you can pluck the leaves off as you're, putting it in your grinder to roll a joint or whatever you want. My entire brand was built around minimal processing, which means we leave a lot of the sugary leaf on the bud. The really important leaves to remove are the ones that have no crystals on them, that have no sugar on them. Um, and so, yeah, you trim each bud. You want to have as little of the stem showing as possible at the bottom. And then then you throw them in your jar. Um, Someone just asked uh, how to make my buds more dense and not so fluffy. So, fluffy buds can be a number of different things, usually a combination of all of them. It could be the genetics. Uh, More often than not, I would say it's not the genetics. Most modern genetics have the potential of putting out big, healthy buds. Um, it could be the amount of direct sunlight you're getting at the end of the year. It's good to check your sun track. You might have a really, really, really big sun track in the middle of the summer, but then when the sun gets low in the sky, your day gets shorter, and you might only be hitting the plant with 3 or 4, maybe 5 hours of direct sunlight. So that can contribute to smaller bud production. The third thing, which is probably the most common, is some kind of soil imbalance or lack of nutrition. Um, I see it's Gina. Gina, I'm happy to dive into this deeper with you, or maybe refer back to the previous presentation about fertilizers and plant nutrition. The primary nutrient for big flowers is phosphorus. So you want lots of phosphorus available to the plant in the flowering stage. That can come in the form of seabird guano or fish hydrolysate liquid. Um, and then at the end, the very end of the cycle, maybe 2 to 3 weeks before harvest, you also want to provide lots of potassium, maybe in the form of a soluble kelp powder. And all that potassium. So you just grew a nice big bud, and then the potassium helps to densen it up at the very end, helps to finish properly. There's a link right there in the chat for part 2. If you don't find the answer to your question in there, reach out to me directly on Instagram at downohmfarms or downohmfarms@gmail.com.
Writing this. Farms@gmail.com. This is great, Daniel. Awesome. So those are ways you can get in touch with Daniel. If you have any other questions about um, the whole process, really, Daniel has done everything from garden prep and setting up and germination techniques in part one, and part two is soil health, nutrition, and pest control. And then, of course, we're talking about drying, curing, and storing your harvest today. So he's very familiar with the entire process from beginning to end and all the ins and outs and everything that can go wrong and in between. So he's a great resource, and definitely check out his Instagram at Down Home Farms, or email him if you have any questions. Other than that, are there any other last minute questions before we wrap up here? Just got an opportunity to do so. If not, then Daniel, you have any last words for us?
Just want to say thank you for this opportunity. This was the third of 3, and it was really great. Appreciate everyone that jumped on live to participate, and looking forward to the next one, amending native soil, right?
That's on March 26th, just a couple of weeks with Daniel from 3 to 4 p.m. And I put the link in the chat to register, and that will just be another way to increase your yield and make those buds dense and not so fluffy, and going into all the fun ways of amending native soil here in Nevada County. Yeah, so I think that's it. Thank you so much, Daniel, for doing this series with us and for being here today. We appreciate you so much.
My pleasure. Thanks, everybody.
All right, take care, everyone. Bye.